This is the DRF Players Podcast. Here are your hosts, Peter Thomas Fornatel and Jonathan Kinchin.
Hello and welcome to the DRF Players Podcast. This is show 334, the May 8th, 2018 edition, the Kentucky Derby show, the Kentucky Derby recap show, I should say. I'm your host, Peter Thomas Fornatal, back with you in the Brooklyn bunker. My co-host, he always comes with stuff to say. Today he comes with a little bit of extra to say, and I'm really looking forward to getting a chance to chat with him about his experiences out at Churchill Downs, his annual tradition to make the jaunt in person. I gave that up years ago when I realized the Derby weekend was a vacation after which you needed a vacation. And that would have only gotten more so these days when, gosh, I don't know what it was last week, how many words I spilled and how many hours I broadcast. But happy to be in the Brooklyn bunker, happy to be joined back on the planet Texas. He's had a bunch of nicknames on this show. We've called him the Baron of Breakage. Perhaps now he's the Duke of Disqualification. Really, he's the People's Champion. He's Jonathan Kinchin. What's up, JK?
What's going on? Yes, I'm not non-familiar with a hangover, but this is a different one. This is the Derby hangover. It's always tough. We got 2 weeks until the Preakness, and it's a little bit sad until then. So always a ton of fun, always a lot of build-up. The racing is always amazing. We always hope for good weather, but and then you're frustrated when it's not good. But then when you look back on it, you're fine with the way that it was, and so had a ton of fun.
How much, this is not a question I planned on asking, especially not at the top of the show with all the stuff we have to discuss, but I'll forget if I don't ask it now. How much does it diminish? Let's say we're dealing with a scale of 10 for fun, 10 being the funnest, 0 being a trip to the dentist. How does the Derby change on the fun scale when you have horrific weather conditions such as we saw on Saturday?
See, the best thing about it is that it really only matters how you do pari-mutually. Because I've been to the Derby when it's gorgeous, and I've had to take a couple of trips to the ATM, and it's like a 3. And then there's these times like this when it's pouring rain. You stand inside the whole time. Literally didn't even sit in our third floor box until the running of the Derby with a trash can over my head. Thank you to Doug Bradar, the jockey's agent of Florent Giroux, was standing behind me and gave me a trash bag to use as a poncho to watch the Derby. If you win money, then it turns into a 9 or a 10 automatically. So this one actually turned out to be pretty good.
I'll let you get to your red boarding before the show is over, but we're going to start off. Okay, no secret, not the best relations in the world between the company that we work for, really that I work for, Daily Racing Forum, and our friends at Churchill Downs, way above my pay grade and all, not making any judgments. But we deemed it maybe not so wise to play the call of the Kentucky Derby at the top of the show, something that, under other circumstances we might have wanted to do. So instead, we're going to do this thing that we do from time to time on the show. And I'm not going to have you watch the regular Kentucky Derby feed. I'm going to have you go, where can they find it most easily, JK?
I would think probably at Travis Stone's Twitter page, at Travis Stone on Twitter.
At Travis Stone on Twitter. Go and watch the GoPro video of Travis calling the race, now his 15, 16, 17, fourth Derby.
Pete does math and succeeds.
Almost as rare as JK does math succeeds. I want you to watch the call. So go ahead, pause this. If you're out running around, I understand if you can't do it. But if you're in position, pause the show. If you're listening back, sorry, live listeners, you're out of luck. Pause the show and watch Travis Stone calling the Kentucky Derby. There you have it. Great stuff once again. Fantastic cameo by a friend of the podcast, Nick Tamaro. Friend of the podcast, Travis, too. That's his voice you hear right up at the top. And also our buddy Joe Doc from Naira getting a little bit of a cameo, the second high five from the grassy knoll, as he said on Twitter. Let's talk about this race, JK. We'll just start. Justify. How good was this performance?
I thought it was really good. It worked out. Not always do you design a race to work out the way that it does, but I tell you one thing, it does help when you have a superior athlete, a horse that's as talented as he is. He just put himself into a perfect position. He sat right off of promises fulfilled. He broke well, which was a concern going into it. We talked about it. Baffert talked about it being a concern. He wasn't exactly the swiftest away in his previous races. He was a lightly raced horse, so the experience factor comes into play there. He broke well. He got into a great position. We were watching the race live, and obviously we'll get to that later, but all of our attention was on Justify. I watched it with the Prince of Keeneland, and we kept looking at fractions, and he kept yelling, "He's going too fast." And I kept saying, I kept saying, "No, he's going to be okay." And then when they turned for home, I was just hopeful, and he allowed me to continue to yell, "Go on, big horse, go on!" And he did so. So he ran really, really well. I think Good Magic definitely deserves a lot of credit. He was pretty close to that same quick pace. I think that he showed us that he is the 2-year-old champion that we thought he was. He'll be heard from without a doubt for the remainder of the year. And then Audible ran well too. Audible was one that I wasn't against per se, but one that I wasn't exactly high on, and he ran well too. Got a little bit to close into, but nonetheless ran well enough. And so a really great addition to the Kentucky Derby. And like many others, I think we're probably really excited about what's going to happen in the next couple weeks.
He is who we thought he was regarding Good Magic. You quoting Dennis Green a little bit there?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
That was an impressive run. Let's talk about this pace. Coded Red throughout on time form seemed like it couldn't be anything but scorching based on what the rare figures would be for these numbers as they came back. How was he able to persevere? How was he able to persevere through that pace? And I'd like to just to hear your general thoughts on if it was as fast as Jake and as I thought it was when we were watching the first time through.
It's not an exact science, but it is at least there's some science to it that I subscribe to, is that when you're going fast, the rest of them are going fast too. And that's kind of the way I've always viewed it. Not always viewed it, how I've begun to view it. And that's, I think, what happened is Justify was going fast, but the horses that could beat Justify were running fast too. Good Magic being the prime example, being close in there, it dulls his kick. Now, if Justify was going 45 and change, well, Good Magic was going 46 and change, and that takes away a little bit of his kick too. So I think that's one of those, when you say you kind of stick, you run them off their feet, you stick it to them, you bring the race to them. Those phrases, I think, what come to mind and what happened is he ran fast, and faster than I think most people would design their choice to win a 1.25 mile race in the slop to run. But he strung everyone else along too, and he happened to be the best horse. And so when it came time for that final eighth, and for horses to kick in, he had just as much, if not more, than some of the other horses that were trying to catch up to him.
I love that point. And, I'll note that the horse, to me, watching through the first time, that seemed to have the most horse in closing had, to my mind, what was simply an awful trip in Hofburg. Buried, uncomfortable, stuck in and among, buried again, gets out for a little bit, starts to pick up, but the race is run at that point, gallops out past everybody. The pace being as fast as it was, another advantage is closers are always going to have the risk of dealing with the kind of trip that a horse like Hofburg got in there. There's so much luck. There's so much chaos in racing that a lot of people don't want to acknowledge. It's so easy to be super result oriented and just say, okay, well, these horses ran first, second, and third, therefore they must be the best horses in the race. You can say they were the best horses on the day, but I think it's a mistake sometimes to get so literal about what you see in the form, especially when you go back. Let's talk about some of these other runners. I love what you said about Good Magic. Audible, what did you think of his performance?
I thought it was good, especially for a horse that I was trying to be against the majority of this this 3-year-old year based on, I'm a big workout guy and the workouts were not good. He's obviously proven to me that he's smarter than I am. He decides to save his energy for the afternoons, and he's run well again. So I thought he ran good. I think that he's definitely one that if we can foreshadow a little bit, if he's going to show up in the Belmont, he'll be one that I think people will talk about. People that are looking to look for a horse that could potentially upset a Triple Crown or just win a Belmont race in general. I think that Audible will definitely be one that will be considered. And a horse that you mentioned a few minutes ago is another horse that I probably owe a little bit of an apology to, and that's a horse that I bet against in a head-to-head, and that's Hofburg. He ran huge. Lightly raced horse. I can't imagine the amount of dirt he ate, the amount of trouble that he had, and to finish the way that he did, being so lightly raced. He's another one that I think would be a little bit. I'd be a little bit fearful if I was the connections of a horse that was trying to do something special come the first Saturday in June.
Let's keep talking about. It's actually the second Saturday in June, I believe. This
really?
year, anyway. Isn't it June 9th this year?
Oh, maybe it is.
But anyway, I don't know if that, JK tries party planning tales. Is that a thing?
The first Saturday, you're right. The first Saturday in June, I'll probably be at Monmouth for the Pick Your Prize Challenge. Little plug
now you're talking.
Brian Skirka and crew. Yeah, you're right. It's the second Saturday in May. Oh, in June.
The mistake jar is right. We're rocking and rolling in the mistake jar today.
JK tries calendar and fails.
Let's talk about a few more of these horses and their trips and what you think of them going forward. And then we're going to ask the big question. I see some chatter on Twitter. Paul Matisse with an interesting chime in about the Triple Crown Series and the way that it unfolds. Instilled regard for me is the trip that a lot of people, and we'll get to this when we talk about Mendelssohn, but a lot of people have talked about what a hard trip it is. I don't really see it, I mean, I think this was a horse that, yes, there was visual trouble in the stretch, and he was staying on, and it maybe cost him something, but I didn't think it was some horror show. I thought this was a horse who came from far back, had the benefits of the searching pace to sort of run into it, not unlike the next horse we'll talk about, My Boy Jack. I thought this one was a little overblown. What in terms of like trouble? Oh, I definitely want to bet him back. What did you think of Instilled Regard?
Yeah,
I assume you've gone through all the trips here, by the way.
No, I think you have to be careful when you want to try to bet a trip horse back off of a visible situation where maybe he steadied, or maybe he had to go super wide, or maybe he had to take up a bit when he is closing into a 1.25 mile race where they went 45 in the slot. And all the other horses that attended the pace finished behind that horse. I think that it's one of those trips you want to be careful with. If you want to compare him to another closer and then say that he actually closed better than so-and-so, I think that's fine. But to try to upgrade the performance significantly based off of a pace setup that he got, I think that could lead you down the wrong path.
Let's talk about My Boy Jack for a second. First of all, what was this betting about? How is this horse 6-1, JK?
I seriously have no idea. I mean, I really have zero idea, and maybe we'll poke Marshall Graham. I know he had said some really and tweeted some really interesting things just about the horse and in terms of value and where he was predicted to be based on the double pool, where he actually went off in the win pool, and how he felt like that actually affected the takeout of the race by having a horse who was bet down so much that didn't have nearly the shot that the tote board suggested. With all that said, he ran well. Well enough at least. I have no idea. I mean, I don't know if it was just like I don't know if Saul Kuhman made a big bet. He clearly has a lot of money. He owns 19,000 horses. I really don't know. I really can't figure it out.
I do believe that there's weird narratives and weird things we've seen in betting on Derby Day in the past. But when Calvin was having his run, the way one year in particular, Pants on Fire, or maybe that was the one that Rosie was on. But there were two horses in one Derby that were both similar to this, bet to a fraction of what they should have been. It clearly seemed like it was narratives of people wanting to bet the female jockey, people wanting to bet the guy who wins the race every year, as opposed to looking at the form. Now, there's a story back in the day, Belmont Park would have 30,000 people. Any horse with a human's name in it would be like an auto underlay. Also, any horse with Irish in the name, auto underlay. It almost made me wonder if that wasn't some of this money in the win pool is how everybody in the world knows somebody named Jack, and somehow the accumulation of all these small bets actually had an impact on the pool. How crazy is that?
I don't think it's crazy. I don't think it's crazy at all. And while we're on the topic, I think that although my boy Jack was a very shocking one because he got bet down to 6-1, I think there's another horse in here that was overbet too, and I think this was a narrative one. And the one that I think that was overbet is Vino Rosso, who went off at 14-1, while his stablemate, undefeated Magnum Moon, went off at 13-1. I would say that Vino Rosso was a little bit overbet, and I would imagine it has something to do with people's affinity for the red wine beverage.
That's a good guess, actually. I'm not sure if enough of them speak Italian, but it's a good guess. I would have said that the Vino Rosso money was a result of the jockey booking and people's perception that John Velasquez thought Vino Rosso was better than the other contingent of Pletcher horses. That's just a guess, but I do think that factored into why he got so much love. Whereas, as we've discussed before, there can be all kinds of political reasons why a rider might end up on a certain horse that as simple as, I think he's the best, so I'm going to pick him. What do you think of that theory?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think a lot of people play the jockey game, and when Johnny shows up for Todd, you would imagine that Johnny's got first call. And I think we've already discussed it. I think it was more of a Rapoli thing than anything.
And Vinny Viola, too. I mean, they won the Derby last year. He
Absolutely.
and Rapoli have this long-standing relationship. There could have been within the margin of error, and you go with the guys who you've had all the success with. I don't know. It seems
I also think since we're talking about Todd, I have to at least defend myself and you for a second here. For our Canadian friend who tried to make fun of me for taking Free Drop Billy and over the 4 Pletchers, Free Drop Billy, although he was bad, did finish in front of 2 Pletchers.
Okay, but the horse that he picked to beat you in the head-to-head, was that one of the Pletchers?
Eric Bialik picked Audible. He just said, you're an idiot for picking Free Drop Billy over 4 accomplished Pletcher horses. And my answer to him is, well, he beat 2 of them.
Now, I thought there was some chatter on Twitter that you were actually going to send this guy the money for the bet he didn't make. I hope you weren't serious about that.
I actually forgot. I was going to send him $2.50 and then say it was a typo. I still might.
He did publish an email address out there for all to see, for better.
I hope he gets spammed. I hope he gets one of those emails from some grandmother in Nigeria who got her wallet stolen and he sends the money.
Not nice. Not nice at all, JK. A bet that you did actually make in life was the Hofberg bet. We talked about that one. Not too much to unpack there with Free Drop. It seemed like just a non-effort. We don't necessarily have to go through every runner in the field, but there are a couple more we need to talk about. Lone Sailor, one that I would definitely give some count to. I thought that was pretty close to a no-shot trip. The way that he got stuck and stymied down on the inside. Any interest in betting Lone Sailor back in the right situation?
No, I think he's one of those horses where if you he gets a clear trip, he has a chance of running 4th or 5th, but he didn't get a great trip, so he ends up running 8th. I'm sure he's a nice horse. He'll do well in some spots, some minor spots. I don't think he's our Travers winner or our Haskell winner, but he's the type of horse that could show up and run well in some of the minor 3-year-old races that are prepping for some of the bigger summer stuff.
Yeah, to clarify, Hofberg, a horse I'd be much more interested in as a potential winner of a Grade 1 down the line. Lone Sailor, interesting betting vehicle, like you say, JK, probably more for underneath, but not one that I want to forget just based on the far-ish back finish. Where did he end up? 8th?
Yes, 8th.
I feel like we should touch on Bolt Doro. Seemed like really either him or the next horse I'm going to bring up, you'd call the disappointment of the race. But I think when you factor the trips in, Boldoro, the disappointment of the race. Any theories on what might have happened here? Anything that you saw that I did not see that might have provided an excuse?
Oh, how much money would you have lost on a head-to-head if there was a Firenze versus Boldoro?
I think I'd be broadcasting from my car.
Right. So
because the house would be on.
Here's what I'll say about Boldoro is that I believe that what happened to Boldoro is what pretty much every person with a horse racing opinion, the only knock that you could come with on Boldoro, I think it might have caught up to him, and I'll let other people figure out exactly what I'm talking about.
I think you're talking about the hands that the horse is in, and the extra credit one gives a trainer. I mean, can we say that? Is that where you're going?
The horse is unbelievably talented, and the horse has really done a great job to get where he was. But there's really no excuse. He didn't really have that much of an excuse. Yes, he was wide, and he attended the pace, and maybe he's not as good as Justify and all those other things. But you just wonder if the rider change, the cranked not cranked, the didn't try to win the race, maybe all of those things, the lack of experience might have had something to do with it. Maybe not, but it at least is one of the things one of the excuses that you would look to. Because he looked good enough traveling around there. Like I said, working throughout the week. I don't know horse flesh as much as many, but he looked good. He was galloping with a lot of energy, and it was kind of a stagnant performance.
Felt like one of the more mixed message horses. This isn't my own opinion, but just from reading DRF and reading other sources of people who are clapping eyes on these horses in the morning. It was one that you got the full range of opinions on. I would say definitely the ones who you would have expected to run A races based on most of the Clocker chatter I heard. I'd have put Justify as the number one, Good Magic as the number two, and honestly, probably Hofburg I heard the third most nicest things about by the time the race got near, all of whom fired. Boldoro was more of a back and forth kind of chatter I was hearing on it.
I saw just another idea before we move on. Is I saw somewhere on Twitter, Instilled Regard is like the longest price horse to hit the Super since like 15 years plus. I don't remember if it was like 2001 or like 98 or 91 or it's been a while. It's been a significant amount of time, which is interesting. I just figured that someone would have clunked up for a piece. And you think about some of the long shots that have hit the board. Should not even hit the board, hit the exacta in Golden Soul and the Command. I can't remember the other one. Commanding Curve, the West Point horse. Those horses weren't even 85-1. So that was I think interesting to see that.
I think some of that comes down to that odds compression that still existed in this year's Derby, but we've talked about it before. If you look, and Marshall Graham must follow on Twitter at Truxton Stables with an S. I'll double check that. Marshall must follow on Twitter. Sent out the odds that the double, you mentioned it before, the odds that the Oaks Derby double would have predicted versus the actual win pool. And one of the things you notice the most in there is how many horses are over 100-1. And it seems like every year in the Derby there are horses that should be 100-1 or north of them, Mind That Bird being one, who end up going off not nearly that long, something of an effect of like just the flood of liquidity on the market and people with memories of horses like Giacomo and Mind That Bird winning, and the perception that the Derby is a chaos race and all the money that comes in. You see horses that should be much longer going off shorter. I think that's probably part of the reason why this price of Instilled Regard went higher than in some of these others, JK, because this year there were so many logical horses in that, well, I guess 5-2, what Justify was, range up to 11-12-1. I feel like some of them had to drift a little bit, and I think that's what happened with Instilled Regard. But folks should check out that graphic. I'll make sure to save you the trouble of having to dig. I'll send it around. Make sure you follow Marshall Graham. Lots of great stuff in that feed, and particularly interesting to look at the implied odds. One of the biggest, what the Brits would call a RIC difference, difference in markets in those double odds versus the parimutuel odds. And it was Marshall's theory, and one that I agree with. Our assumption was that the double money would be sharper money than the win pool money was, which, for various reasons we can get into if somebody wants to ask the question, but Mendelssohn 4.3 to 1 there ends up going off nearly 7 to 1. Now, some of this has to do with the weather conditions too. I think a lot of Mendelssohn supporters, Brits are not accustomed at all to watching, and the Irish in this category too, not in the custom of watching slop dirt races. And they're like, I get the impression from talking to English and Irish friends, they're almost difficult for them to watch. I just look so ugly compared to what they're used to looking at. I guess that's one way of saying it. And I think there's a perception, and not entirely wrong, that slop races are an invitation to chaos. So I do think that was some of the difference in that price with Mendelssohn going off so much longer in that poll. I don't know if you've been following me on Twitter, JK. I've been yapping about this for days now, ever since the race finished. I just think it's incredibly unfair for folks out there to be saying super negative things about O'Brien and about Mendelssohn based on this performance. It seemed very clear to me that his race was over a few yards out of the gate. He did not get position. This is a horse. His one dirt race was by many, many measures the fastest dirt race that any of these had ever run going in. He had the best form of any horse coming into this race based on that amazing Breeders' Cup juvenile turf run and all the good stuff that's happened from the runners coming out of there. This was a live horse who didn't break, got buried, and then got buried and then got hammered again. And quite honestly, Ryan Moore, sharp guy, running 8th, 6th, the Kentucky Derby doesn't mean anything to these guys. This is a horse that's probably still worth $10 million, who they took care of for a chance to fight their day. And I had coming out of the woodwork, it's still hard being one example of people going back in the back machine to shared belief. Oh, well, if you really say these other horses ran well with bad, why couldn't he still run a bit? And to me, that's ignoring the fact that you can't treat every horse the same. You're looking at, and this was a horse who was going to need a getaway, going to need position, and when he didn't get it, his over clear and simple. Instead, he takes a little of a bump. And closer who gets the best pace to run into. I mean, on the day he ran the Mendelssohn, I'm not that, but it's just not as simple of an equation as people make it be. And I think this idea that somehow Aidan O'Brien isn't capable of finding the right formula to win this is just, I just think it's very short-sighted. And I'm trying to examine in relation with friend Sean Borman why it annoyed me much, and I was wondering if I was a little defensive as somebody did pick the whole. Granted, the international arbitrage that we talked about the show, so it's not like I was dead feeling defensive. But I think it's more than that. I just so silly, and it's just a way of looking at the world that I like to see. I don't mind people aren't entitled to their opinion. I don't mind an amount of haters or want to say. I just didn't smart. I felt compelled to talk about it. Do you buy what I'm saying here? If you want to argue about it.
No, I mean, here's the thing. Well, first of all, I find a lot of those people who want to rub your opinion in your face to be a little bit annoying because they're typically people that aren't very pari-mutually involved, because if you're pari-mutually involved, you don't feel the need to then book out how right you are or how wrong someone else is, or you have to argue because you're your stance with your dollar. That's where you're going to make your stance. So a lot of people that are throw and whoever face your face, Berniere's face, it's a little bit agitating to the point. I will say this to Craig Berg's point that we talked about when we were doing the preview show is the reason that I kind of was against Mendelssohn was what I felt as if this situation could happen, where he could be slow from the gate. If he is slow from the gate, he's going to then be behind horses and eat slop and not like that. Or he's going to have to attend a pace that will be too fast, which would have been for him. I don't think he would have stayed on when they 45. I that's a lot for a horse who's never traveled that fast. In a 1.25 mile race where, that's not how they're trained that way. Just anyways, but I don't think it's fair.
I have a quibble with that. I mean, this is a horse who, you look at his pace figures in Dubai and how he finished. I mean, you've got a little bit of work on this. You got to keep in mind published splits from Dubai. You're not going to have up in that first fraction, so it's going to look American eye. But to me, he had the ability to run fast internals and stay on, and in other races, he'd shown the ability to get position going forward and actually show real finish. So I don't see why he couldn't have done that. And I don't think this was a case of an inexperienced horse breaking slowly. I think this was a case, and this is something that's next on my list to talk about so we can pivot to it, of this ridiculous situation that we've had now with whatever it is, 3 of the last 5 years, where the 15 horse comes over on the 14 horse. And at the draw, actually, and she deserves a lot of credit for this, a great observation by Donna Brothers, mentioned that she, and I didn't take this seriously enough, but she mentioned this idea that horses run to empty spaces. One of the reasons why very often in a chute, when there's no running rail, you'll be putting out slow 1 on your trip notes on so many horses breaking down from the inside. When there isn't that running rail there, they tend to break a half step slow. In this case, in the Derby, it seems like annually horse 15 is coming over and certainly happened the last 2 years, and those aren't the only times, and hampering the horse in the 14 gate. It's 2018. Can't we come up with a solution for this?
Yeah. I mean, if you have any questions, if Churchill can afford to get a new gate, just take a look at how much they handled. I think they broke records. I know they broke a record on Friday. I didn't see the final numbers for Saturday. I would imagine that they broke a record for the weekend with breaking it on Friday. Even despite the weather, the field still seemed to stay intact. This is their biggest event. This is the event that makes CDI and Churchill what it is. I mean, obviously they got some great other things going on with the Stephen Foster and Travis Stone, but I think that it makes. I don't know how much a gate costs, right? But it feels as if they could get a 20-horse gate built and just keep it back there, and it's just there for the Derby, and they use it once a year. I think that the return on that investment would be worth it.
I couldn't agree more. All right, while we're on the CDI question, I want to talk about this pick 6 situation that a couple of people have asked me about, and it really annoys me. So, sort of the established paradigm in the pick 6 is nobody hits the pick 6. The pick 6 money seeds the pool the next day. The entire carryover for this bet, this established, we've been doing this for a long time now. That money is meant to go into the same pool. That's not the way they do it at Churchill Downs. I don't have all the information. I meant actually to call Mike Maloney and talk to him before the show today to ask him for a little bit of background on this. And if folks are interested, maybe we can follow up and try to get a little bit more information. But apparently, the Kentucky Racing Commission has approved the idea that Churchill is now allowed to split this money and use, what is it, JK, half in the traditional sense and half to seed the rainbow pick 6 that they're running?
Yeah, they don't call it a rainbow, but the same idea. So I think it's good to use that as the analogy because everyone will know what you mean by rainbow, or the description, excuse me. Yeah, I mean it's double gross. It's gross for that reason, and we'll get to that the splitting of the splitting of the carryover, the seeding. The other thing about it to me that's gross is that it's a $2 bet on Derby Day, but on Thursday it drops to a 20-cent bet. So it's like you're like moving the goalposts on me a little bit. And I play on Saturday with a $2 and then 20 cents. And now I'm having to face other people to get the money that I put in to the first one that is supposed, you know what I'm saying? It's just, I think that's gross. And then I obviously think that the splitting of the carryover to essentially seed the biggest money grab bet that there is in racing.
I'm glad you framed it that way, and I'll go off a little, and then I'll hand the baton to you because I've already gone off plenty on the show. But where I think JK is going with that, and the way that I certainly feel, and we're going to need a square. We're going to need a new bingo square for Rainbow Rant because you're going to probably be hearing a lot of them. This bet, while cynically marketed to the average player, essentially becomes a benefit to two groups of players. Now, one group of players, I think includes us, people who, usually in our case, we're not doing it on our own, but we'll put together money, we'll put together some sharp money and go after these things. And we've had some success, and that's great. But that's not accessible to the average fan to whom this bet is being marketed. And then the other players who I think clearly it's almost being run as a total benefit for are computer-oriented players who are going to be in there during the run of the whole bet with the opportunity to scoop on certain occasions. And by scoop, I mean have the one ticket that triggers this whole jackpot. Or they're going to be bringing a gun to a knife fight on mandatory payoff day. And we can sort of get in there by, we can get our arsenal up enough to have a shot in there. But, it's not bad for me because I'm just not going to play the bet till the mandatory. And then we're going to put our heads together and we're going to raise enough money that we're not bringing a knife to a gunfight on mandatory payout day. But I just think it's, our own selfish interests aside, JK, it's not a bet that affords a little player much chance. And, we could even argue, and this, it's like the Marshall Graham tribute show. I'd love to hear his point of view on this. But economically, as successful as the bet feels, maybe it is a financial success. You see what they handle on these mandatory payout days. But that's not the only part of the equation. The amount of money that ends up getting tied up in these things, I would love an economist to tell me what the real effect is. I'm not convinced I am convinced it's not as good as the simple analysis of, oh, look what they handled on mandatory payoff day would have you believe. Piggyback on that, please.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think that the biggest point that you said in that whole thing that strikes home for me the most is that it's marketed to the smaller players. It's marketed to the guys that are at their racetrack on a Thursday who have on their work clothes and are playing the 20-cent pick six because there's a chance at a lifetime score, and they can buy a ticket for an affordable price. So, in so many things in racing, at least not so many, but at least like three that I've dealt with in like the last year and a half, and I won't even go into what those were, but I'll just tell you how I feel about this one is. Well, what I would say to the racetrack is, if you're so concerned with like the handle and what's driven, then make the pick six a $5 minimum. And what they'll tell you is the answer they won't do that is because, whoa, no, but that doesn't give the little guy a chance. That that plays into the big guy's hands. That plays into the big bettors, the computer guys. It plays. So it's like they don't want they're playing into those people's hands, but they want it to look like they're not, rather than just making it just being out front with it and just.
Yeah, the reality is you could definitely argue that the reality is the opposite. When a base bet is, let's just use $2 as an example, because I've thought this one through. I'd have to think through some other unintended consequences of the $5 minimum in your theoretical example. But the $2 bet means it's less about properly arbitraging different combinations and more about picking horses. That certainly gives the professional individual horse player, that puts the individual professional horse player on an exact level playing with the computer players. The ability to more or less, buy outcomes just by eliminating a few horses and betting efficiently goes out the window when that minimum goes up. So if a track were to tell you that was worse for the $2 is somehow, favoring the computer players, I don't think that's right.
No, I agree. So it's just too bad. It's I understand that racetracks have to come up with creative marketing tools to create revenue based on the changing landscape. Obviously I'm not taking responsibility for the ADW problem. I mean, that's more of their thing. They got to work that out. The racetracks do, but the attendance and and all of these things, and on-track handle is obviously on the decline. So we have to think of some creative ways to create revenue. But I just wish that it wasn't. It didn't feel so gross in these situations, and I just don't like. I don't like the fact that they're gonna then take that $300 and whatever $1,000 it is and stick it in an account that the horse player won't see for another, till the end of July when the meet's over.
I don't know. They might do a mandatory payout halfway through, but the point remains the same. Yeah, there's a word for that, and I don't want to use the word, but you can all probably think of it with me. There's a word for it when you're taking the money from the place it's supposed to be and putting it in another place, and it may not technically be an accurate word to use in this situation, so I'm not going to use it because I assume, obviously the Kentucky Racing Commission must have approved this thing, meaning that it is in fact legal, but it doesn't feel entirely that way, does it?
Yeah, it's unfortunate, because I've had a bunch of people. I can't tell you how many people have messaged me and said hey, is there a pick six carryover on Thursday? And it's I'm still trying to decide if the value is there. Where as a horse player, you're kind of required to you're required to try to take a look at it at least this Thursday because there is that $300,000. But it sure would have been a lot cooler if it was $700.
Yeah. All right, let's move on from that. I do want to make one very positive point about racing. I feel like I've been a little critical of fans, a little critical of racetracks. I want to bring the good vibes back just by saying the weather that was there, the people who showed up, the amount of money bet, the demise of racing greatly exaggerated. At least Saturday's results certainly look that way. Let's move on, JK, and talk about the Kentucky Derby betting challenge. Amazing story at the top of the leaderboard with Patrick McGoey, the two-time Breeders' Cup betting challenge winner, getting his third six-figure cash. This is an amazing story because this is a guy who doesn't even really consider himself a contest player, primarily anyway, and he is now, very close. He's up there with, in terms of amount of six-figure scores with the only two people I can think of for sure who have more than him are Christian Helmers and, of course, Garrett Skiba, who has the most six-figure cashes of anybody these days, now I believe at 6. So what did you make of Patrick's performance?
I thought it was great. I love those guys. Those brothers are always fun to see at the racetrack. They're always having a great time, always have smiles on their faces. They're always extremely happy for you when you're doing good, and you kind of feel the same way when they're doing good. So it's always fun to see those guys at the track, and some resume Patrick has put together. Two of my favorite photo finishes in the history of racing. When he's snapped old Christian a couple times, that's always fun. But
you had to go there. You had to go there.
No, but they're great. So I was really happy that they did so well.
Frank McGoey running third in the same event. I have an article up. I'll make sure to send that around too. Did you get a chance to read it?
I did read it. I did. I read it on the plane, and then I text Frank, "You're welcome."
And the reason you say you're welcome is somebody else was supposed to be third in the Kentucky Derby betting challenge, but he went and got himself DQ'd. JK, what happened?
I just didn't read the rules very good. There's if you haven't looked at them, I jump on and look at it, and maybe you'll feel a little sympathy for me. Maybe you won't. On Friday, it said that you had to bet $500 per race on a minimum of 4 different races, and then in all capital letters it said, or a total of $3,000 must be wagered. So essentially, if you just bet $3,000 on one race, then you were good for the day. That's what I did on Friday. I made one wager on Friday, and I hit it. And then on Saturday, it says a minimum of $500 per race on a minimum of 4 different races, and in all capital letters it says, and a total of $8,000. I did not read it as I needed to make 4 bets on Saturday. I read it now, and I do see that is the case. It was just a mistake. Four
bets, and I still don't understand what it means, if I'm being honest. So 4 bets
of $500
to total $8,000?
to bet four bets of 500 at least.
Okay. Oh,
and you have to find a way to bet the other whatever $6,000.
But I wanted to come on here, JK, and bury you. I really did. But I can't. It is a little confusing. And I don't understand the need for that Friday rule of having two different sets of rules. I don't want to be too stiff with Gary Palmisano here.
No, I told Gary in person. I said, look, man, I made a mistake. I should have read it better.
Yeah, you definitely should have.
But I did tell him, I said, but I will say this. This is a reason why you don't want to have convoluted and confusing rules. I just think it's confusing.
Why have two sets of rules?
It's just
why
confusing.
I can't get my head around want to have two different sets of rules. It's a contest. Everybody should be playing by the exact same rules. I don't like rules with an or in them to begin with, and I think I think that's the root of the problem. But again, I don't. Gary does a good job with that contest. He's kept it going. Very popular with the players. So I don't want to be too stiff here.
Yeah,
but I think he needs to look at that.
I'm just going to say it out loud one more time, just to be clear. I should have done a better job reading the rules. Because it is, if you read it hard enough, you can make it make sense. And if you were confused, I could have checked with Gary.
You could have asked a question.
So I should have done a better job of reading them. I will say this: I had two friends, I won't say their names, call me and tell me, "Oh, damn! If I would have won, I would have got disqualified." Because they read the rules the same way that I did.
That's a bad sign. I think that hopefully it's an easy fix and move on. And meanwhile, let's break out the world's smallest violin for JK on this one. He still walks with 80K.
Yeah, no, it was it was a really weird emotional. Like I was like, we were on cloud, cloud, and we're fired up, and then it's like, oh, wait a second. And then Gary's on the phone. He's like looking all kind of distraught. Like, what's up? He's like, there's a problem. I was like, I thought you just like as a friend telling me there's a problem with something else. And I was like, oh, well, what is it? And he like didn't say anything. I was like, is it me? He said, yeah. And he's like, how many races did you bet? And I was like, oh, dude. I was like, 2. He's like, you had to bet 4. He's like, I'm looking into it. I was like, you don't need to look into it. Just DQ me. I only bet 2. I'm telling you right now, you don't got to look into it.
Well, at least you took your beating like an adult.
Cost me $45,000.
Cost you 45, but you still walk with 80. How did you construct the bets to get to that total?
I had 14,000 going into the turf race, the Old Forester turf. And I played 3 different doubles to justify. I played a 10, forgive me for rounding. I made a $10,000 double with Beach Patrol to justify a $2,000 with Yoshida and 2,000 with Kurlov. Yeah.
Gotcha. Very, very bold bet. What odds? What were you able to turn Justify into in that sense? Now here's a real opportunity to try math and fail.
14,000, so 80,000, like 5.7 to 1.
That actually sounds right. Well, so Eric Bilick will tell us later if you got it correct.
Oh, he does not miss a math mistake on us, does he?
No, he's very good with that, and I appreciate. And the mistake jar, which we'll be donating to the TAA here at the end of the year, which is brimming at this point, is going to really appreciate that. But yes, you're able to double your price by taking 3 horses. That you asked me before the race. I had originally recommended, based on previous winning scores of the Kentucky Derby betting challenge, of just betting on the nose. You'd have ended up with half as much. So I think you asked me if I thought it was a mistake, and the way I saw that race, I felt pretty good about your play, actually.
Right, and then keep in mind the leader had 45,000, I think, going in to the turf race. So right. It just so happens that in the middle, when my money was tied up, I found out that someone had got to 90. So I was essentially, in my mind, if Justify won, I was thinking I can hopefully get second. Well, then Patrick hit the race and got to 99. The guy that was at 90 dropped a little bit, and then I would have been in third if it wasn't for the mistake.
Meanwhile, both Patrick and Frank needed that photo to come good magic audible, not the other way around. In my article, we go through their plays pretty in a bit of detail rather than do that here. You can check it out there. You'd think that would be enough drama, right? Exciting Derby winner. You hit big. You're going to make this extra money. Oh, you're not going to make this extra money because you screwed up. That wasn't the end of the drama Saturday night, was it, JK?
No, not really. But we were talking about the Old Forester Turf Classic. I blame some of it on the Old Forester. No, in all seriousness, we joke about it all the time. I joke. I really don't have a problem with the pick six boys, but they're not very happy at me because I was involved in that letter that showed that we were concerned about the way that the Breeders' Cup betting challenge went. So they're frustrated at me by that. We mentioned before, I approached them to talk about it and to express why I did what I did, why I felt like it needed to be addressed. They chose that they didn't want to speak to me. So we went upstairs after all of this happened to see some friends before we left to watch the 13th and 14th or whatever it was at Churchill. As I'm walking out, a gentleman approaches me and says, "Why do you have a problem with Kevin McFarland?" And I said, "I don't have a problem with Kevin McFarland. I think he's a little whiny, but I don't have a problem with it. I've tried to speak to him before about it, and he refuses to talk to me, so there's nothing, whatever." So for 4 escalators downstairs, this guy continues to tell me how good Kevin and I are for the sport and how we need to unite. And I said, "Look, man, I'll talk to him anytime he wants to. In fact, I'll fly to L.A. or San Diego, and we can sit down and chop it up and talk about whatever he wants to talk about." And he just keeps going in circles. Finally, I see Kevin, and I said, "Hey, man, what's up? You want to talk?" And Kevin says to me, I can't remember exactly what he said. I just know he did say, there's a part of it I'm not sure about, but I do know that he said, "I don't want to talk to you. You ruined the game." So then like I said, I just got DQ'd out of 45,000, and I had a few Old Foresters. I said some not nice things to him, and he said him back, and it was one of those little silly moments, and that was it.
Can I interrupt here for a second? Let me just interrupt. We'll put there's much more to the story, and we'll put it back to you. One, where was TMZ during all this? That's the first thing I'm upset about. Second thing is, I think I see this every morning at Prospect Park when I see Muggs, the handicapping Labrador, and another dog barking at each other on the leash. That's sort of what I'm picturing when I'm picturing you and Kevin yelling at each other at the bottom of the escalator at Churchill Downs. Okay, continue.
Yeah, it was a little bit. It was a little barking. So, whatever. It is what it is. Probably a little sillier than it needed to be. But like I said, I don't have I would love to talk about what happened in that. I would love to talk about the state of contest. I would love to talk about what I feel like are important principles and the integrity of contests and how I think that contests continue to grow and how there can be some things that I think could be problematic for the growth of contests. And frankly, in our sport, there's only certain things that are growing, and that happens to be one of them. So it's provided this opportunity for me, so I hold it kind of near and dear. It is what it is. It is what it is.
I'll give you a few thoughts here. So Kevin, my history with Kevin. For years, one of the guys I considered one of my guys, somebody who I would go to, before we became good friends. You were in this camp, JK. Somebody like a Garrett Skiba, like a Brent Sumja, somebody who is just one of my guys, always happy when he won, great with quotes, obviously sharp, obviously talented player. As a result of my reporting on the Breeders' Cup scandal, we had a little bit. I was just going to say we had a little bit of a falling out. I'm just going to leave it at that. To get into the specifics too much is not important. He's still somebody I want to see and be civil to. He's still somebody I think, when playing by the same rules as everybody else, is really good for contests. Obviously, a sharp enough guy that as long as the rules are the same for him and everybody else, I think you're going to see his name on leaderboards. He's sharp. But he has a knack of saying these things that are almost too frank, that give you a little bit of a window into his psyche. For example, I have the conversation on tape. After Nissan Gabay, his betting partner, won the Breeders' Cup betting challenge, he's walking around talking about how they changed the game. A quote that became really interesting to me as the evidence came out about how the rules, which they had lobbied to be changed, ended up getting changed in a way that enabled Nissan to win the Breeders' Cup contest. So I know that, he throws off these little comments and maybe they mean something. So when he says that you ruin contests, I mean, the only thing I could think of that he'd be upset about, look, he didn't get disqualified. Nissan didn't get disqualified, rightly so, from the Breeders' Cup contest. So I don't see how you're ruining contests other than calling for a higher level of scrutiny about, the ins and outs of what goes on during contest play. I don't see how somebody playing on the level is going to worry about wanting to have plays inspected, frankly. So I'm a little confused by what he might have meant.
You know what? I told you I had a few old forcers. Maybe he said, you ruined your contest, and he knew I got DQ'd. I mean, that's what he's talking about.
Is that possible?
No, I'm joking. There's no way that's what happened.
Maybe he was taunting you. That would make a lot more sense. Anyway, I can't believe you almost got into a fist fight in the middle of Churchill Downs. Any other fallout from that?
No, it wasn't that. It wasn't that big of a deal. No other fallout. Just two dogs barking at each other on a leash.
There you go. Well, hopefully there's room to find some common ground here at some point. Who knows? Perhaps. And I also think you make a mistake when you tar, the so-called Pick Six boys.
You're
being
right.
Christian Helmers, Kevin McFarland, and Nissan Gabe. First of all, Nissan is somebody who you can have an adult conversation with anytime.
You're right.
And doesn't deserve to be tarred with that brush. Yeah, Christian is kind of his own deal. I know Christian was involved in the "we're not talking to you anymore" strangeness, but this is not a Pick Six Boys thing. This is a Kevin McFarland thing.
No, absolutely. And I actually, to be honest, I like one leg. I like one leg of the Pick Three very much. In that, I really do. Nissan and I've never had a weird situation with him. I'm sure he was probably a little bit frustrated, but about the situation. But I would have a conversation, and we actually had a joking exchange on Twitter since then. So he's adult enough to move past it. So it's
still my great disappointment. I tried to get Nissan's perspective first on the podcast and then in print, and it's my great disappointment that we weren't able to get a little bit more of his side of the story covered. But it wasn't meant to be. Anyway, those guys are going to be around contests a long time. Hopefully, we're going to be around contests a long time. I think there's some room for the gap to be bridged. Let's move on, JK, and talk a little bit about what's coming up this weekend. Obviously, we have tons more to talk about from this past weekend, and that's going to happen on a supersized podcast we're going to do on Friday afternoon. We do not have the exact times nailed down, but it feels like it might be from 3:30 to 5:25. We'll just call it 3:30 to 5:30, I guess, on Friday. And it's not just going to be a show where we go back over all the other undercard stakes on Derby and Oaks Day, which will be fun and certainly warrants the supersized treatment based on how long we talked about the Derby today. But we're going to be doing a little contest. Why don't you tell folks what's up?
Yeah, we did this before with a Santa Anita contest. We're going to do it again. It's Outplay JK. It's a $27 entry. If you finish ahead of me, but don't happen to qualify or feed into the qualifier, then you'll get your $27 back. So essentially, it's like a free roll of sorts if you can finish in front of me. So I'll be picking all the favorites, and then we'll see what happens.
And who knows? He may just find a way to get himself DQ'd, folks, and then it's a total free roll.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. I'll find a way.
But let's talk about Saturday and Sunday. What we have going on. Saturday will be the sort of regular last chance contest for the Preakness World Horse Players Tour Santa Anita Challenge. What's it? 458 JK. 1 in 12 win their $5,000 seats. Preakness contest, of course, all the money's added, so de facto no takeout, and a chance to be on this television show we're working on. We'll be filming a pilot that weekend. We're hoping it's going to be really cool. We want you to get involved. Put up $5,000 and play. That's great, but why not have a chance to win your way in? And you can even feed in to this last chance Outplay JK situation on Wednesday and Thursday too for what, $7 is it?
$7.
And then there's a couple other contests I want you to be aware of. Sunday, we've got our big money last chance qualifier. In that one, You put up $1,090. It's fairly expensive buy-in, but 1 in 5 players will win that $5,000 buy-in for the WHT Santa Anita event. That one is going to be an all-in format. The Saturday contest will be a live format, so an opportunity for, a lot of the bigger money players prefer the all-in. We're trying to cater to that. We're also going to have a feeder, hopefully. We've got to confirm this with the powers that be, but hopefully going to have a feeder for that big money Sunday event as part of Friday night's sequence. Anything else to add on the contest front, JK?
No, I mean, obviously you can start kind of getting your plans together for Saratoga, Belmont, Del Mar, and Monmouth. All 4 of those contests are available on DRF tournament, so you can start kind of getting your schedule together for those as well.
Should be fun. And also another fun wrinkle for Friday. JK, I will not be in the bunker. JK will not be on Planet Texas. We will both be at the DRF offices in New York, so that should be fun. Want to do some fun interactive stuff. We're hoping be a great way to support the show, frankly, to help us out and participate in this contest. $27, chance to win in to the last chance, and you get your money back if you finish ahead of JK. Should be a blast, and lots of good content going to be happening. I mean, I think it's perfect. I don't know how much looking ahead we'll do, JK. Maybe we'll do a little looking ahead to the races that we're going to be during the show Friday, a little bit of looking ahead to Saturday. But I think mostly we'll just talk about the weekend that was. Obviously, we didn't even give our boy Yoshida a call, didn't talk Monomoy Girl, didn't talk about this crazy pick 5 that your fellow Austin citizen hit. We'll be getting into all that on Friday.
Sounds like fun. Yeah, we definitely got to talk about that, and I want someone to tweet us that they had Funny Duck and they meant it.
Well, I have there's a Funny Duck case to be made. Sean Borman was a Funny Duck supporter. Didn't manage to put anything else right in the picks. It didn't sound like from when I was talking about him. But we'll talk Funny Duck. We'll answer some questions. We've already got some great ones. Apologies we didn't get to them. Obviously, very, very much to talk about today in terms of the Kentucky Derby, JK becoming an amateur pugilist and all this good stuff. Do you have a closing thought for this Derby recap show, my friend?
It's always fun. And hopefully in Baltimore, the fun will keep going. I'll be at Belmont for sure. And getting on the train when there's a Triple Crown is always a little bit more scary.
No train. You gotta do it in style like we do. You get the Escalade. You pop the bottle of champagne in the back. You do it proper. You gotta do it right one of these years.
Yeah. Well, maybe this is the year I'll do it right.
I like it. We'll save some couch space for you in the bunker. I think I could throw a Bernie Corbett gets the day bed, but maybe we could throw a sleeping bag over the washer dryer and you'll be all set.
That seems so uncomfortable. That's uncomfortable.
That's all the time we have. Thanks so much for joining us for this Derby recap episode of the DRF Players Podcast. We will be back on Friday. We'll let you know if this changes on Twitter. But as of now, we're going to be looking to go live around 3:30. You can be in New York by 3:30, can't you?
Yeah, for sure.
That won't be pushing it?
It'll be close.
Well, that's okay. You can come in partway. I'll do reader mail for the first 15 minutes if we have to and get folks involved in that fun Outplay JK contest. So we will be back on Friday. Thanks to JK. Thanks to Travis Stone. Thanks to Willie Nile for providing our theme music. For more of his great stuff, check out willienile.com. I'm Peter Thomas Fornatal. May you win all your photos.